For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, we are live and amplified. So let's get ready to podcast.
Fire it up.
Welcome, everybody, to another live and amplified livecast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we are back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. We have Shivan Luca. How's it going today, Shivan?
It's going great. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Absolutely, absolutely. First off, I want to thank you for joining us. I know we had you on for our Pancreatic Cancer Foundation, which was a huge success, and I was really excited to see after I kind of regrouped after that madness. I went back and looked at the schedule, and I was really happy to see that you were on the schedule for January, and we could sit down and chat a little bit more and go into a little bit deeper depth about what you got going on, all the new music you released in 2021, and what your plans are for 2022. So,
yeah, cool.
But for the people that are just getting to know you or didn't get a chance to see the pancreatic cancer fundraiser, kind of take a second to introduce yourself and like what your introduction to music was.
Yeah, my name is Shivan. I perform as Shivan Luca. That's my first and middle name. And I've been playing for about 16, 17 years now, since I was like a teenager, like many musicians, many artists, many people in general. I got kind of introduced to making music and to like kind of doing more like pop music and indie music and rock music, that kind of thing. Right around then when I was 16, when I got together with some friends and they wanted to make a band, and, you know, that was really cool as a high schooler. So I was like, okay. And, you know, there was a little bit of a progression getting involved there, but I grew up with music. My parents kind of made me play piano and stuff when I was growing up, and I didn't like it at all at the time, but very, very grateful for that gift now, you know, because it kind of snowballed into a whole, I guess, thing, you know, and I love making music now. So, yeah, but I'm an independent singer, songwriter, producer. My favorite thing to do now, it's been, you know, 17 years, so it's been quite an evolution. At the time, I mostly enjoyed performing and wanted to be, you know, a rock star, like the classical 70s sense of a rock star. But now my deepest love is actually mixing songs on the computer. It's like super fun and so hard and endlessly frustrating, and I don't really have a proper education in it by any means, so it's kind of like a project that never ends. But I double as a scientist, actually work full-time as a researcher, and I work in basic neuroscience, so like how kind of circuits are put together. Right now I work in Drosophila, which is those tiny little fruit fly, the ones that you get on your bananas. And looking at how some circuits are put together in there. So, you know, time is always an issue, and I'm hoping to, you know, have a family one day and stuff like that. So there's a lot of competing interests, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Yeah, I do remember now that you brought up last time that you were a scientist. I don't think we talked about specifically what you studied, but I remember you brought that up last time. So that's really cool. And like you mentioned, obviously competing a lot for your time. And how do you kind of balance all that?
Well, people ask me that all the time. And then they, you know, when someone meets you from, you know, that doesn't know you, and they go like, wow, how can you do, you know, science and music? And the answer is you don't. You know, everyone's a person, right? So if you did it, you could do it too. You would just have to adjust how much you were doing each one. And so, you know, it's been a really slow, the truth is that when you're young and idealistic, you think you can do a lot. And so I was like, I came to LA thinking I'm going to do grad school, and I'm going to also become a rock star at the same time. And, you know, both of them took a lot longer and, you know, aren't really ever complete. So
that is very true. Very, very true. So you're in LA, based out of LA now. Where are you from originally?
I'm a California kid. I don't know if I'd fare well anywhere else. I grew up in Davis, California, close to Sacramento. Okay. And small little town, and it's really nice though. It's kind of liberal and educated, but small, so it's a nice little kind of fusion there. Close to Sacramento, which is really not a big city, but pretty close to San Francisco. And then I spent 5 years in Berkeley, and that was I feel like I kind of found myself a lot during those years in college, and then I came to LA about 10 years ago. So
Okay. Gotcha. So you're 100% California, Northern California, all the way down to Southern California.
yeah,
You
pretty
got to
much.
see pretty much see the entire state, for better or for worse.
That's right.
That's awesome. So kind of moving forward, so your mom or your family kind of forced you into, I use the word forced, but that seems like an accurate description. End up learning how to play piano, and then you were kind of grateful for that later on in life. What other instruments are you fluent in, or did you start to learn as you were going through your musical journey?
Well, I play keyboards now a bit, and that's direct. Well, here we go. Here's the keyboard directly from the piano background. But I actually mostly play guitar. Mostly I play mostly by myself now. So like I write songs on the guitar mostly and singing. And it comes with like often there's like a little hook that has the guitar and the melody kind of already implied. And then I write around that, and then I put something into the computer, and then I try and build a song around it, or maybe I build the whole song before I start recording. Forced is a strong word. My parents were really amazing to
Yeah.
pay for music lessons and all that. So they definitely but I do remember being lazy. I am still lazy, so as a kid I just didn't want to practice and stuff, so I was trying to quit. That's more what I meant. But
Okay.
yeah, but I picked up the guitar at 16, and I think that's always good because that's that's kind of like iconic and what people want to hear kind of or something. So it's a lot of fun. It's a cool instrument, the guitar.
For sure. We'll use strongly influenced. Is that a little bit more accurate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, totally. I mean, force isn't even wrong because I couldn't quit. So
Gotcha. It was just that makes sense. So where are you kind of at? Like, I know you released a whole bunch of music in 2021. You released a few different singles. What would you kind of, just because I know there's a whole bunch of it, would you release in 2021?
oh, that's a good question. In 2021, I don't know if I released anything until my EP. So I was probably working for the first half of the year. I was working on this EP called The 11th Quarry. And then I released that, I think, at the end of July. And then there was a bit of a break, and I was working on these songs, including By My Freedom. But then since that time, actually, so that was actually I think that song came out mid-October. So it hasn't been that long, but it's been a little while. I've had a lot of music since then, but I was going through a lot in my personal life actually, and I couldn't quite get it all the way through to like releasing it. It was more of like an emotional psychological barrier than anything else. So, I've been lamenting for a long time about needing more skills or resources, but those are kind of like accepting where I'm at with those. But I've been exploring this like kind of like emotional connection with your work and what you're doing with it and stuff, and so that's kind of what's been churning for me. But it's getting to a much better place, and I have a lot of work now that I'm really excited to share. So I just need to figure out how to do it.
Awesome. And so now that you've kind of got this back catalog that's ready to be released, how do you kind of prepare for that? How do you prepare for the release? What's kind of going through your mind right now as you prepare for the release?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I don't really know. That's the thing. I feel like most indie musicians don't really know. If there was a good formula, we would all want to plug into it. But I did actually, work with a management team for several months, and they helped me just design release strategies. So that's pretty cool. I would like send them, a song with the lyrics and stuff so they could get a feel of the song, or the person I was working with could get a feel of the song. Then she'd shoot me back an email with like ideas of different social media strategies to, here's a little funny little video you could post that makes, that's somehow connected with your song. And so I dream of doing that kind of thing, and the regularity of posting, the kind of creativity of content creation is really fun. But it's like so much time and effort that it's like, I don't know if I can really properly do it. So I've got to like settle on what I can really do, and then like do that and just let that be, and try not to let it take too much time away from making the music, because it's like, a whole thing to promote. So.
Gotcha. So are you as far as what you have, do you think, would you see it more at, like, obviously you'd mentioned that you're still kind of planning a release strategy, but do you see it in the vein of just doing singles, or do you see you have enough for like an EP and LP? Like, where's your mindset kind of on that aspect of how you release it as far as singles, EPs, LPs?
I was just thinking about that last night, actually. I mean, I really don't know what to do. I've got 6 songs now. I was just counting that are like pretty darn close to ready to go. And that's definitely enough for an EP. And I don't honestly almost like to work for a few more months and get maybe a couple more songs in there and make it almost a full album. And I love to think like that. I like to think with a 9-track mind or like a, 10, 12-track mind or something like that. Because albums are great, it's the like, artistry of like the whole album and with all the songs together is like, kind of more than the sum of its parts. So it'd be really cool to do that. But I feel like it's actually, people these days, the way we consume media is so kind of like fast. It might be better to just kind of roll it out slowly. Yeah. So the goal is to get people to listen to it and connect with it. So maybe, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that weird, like I have this conversation with a lot of the musicians we have on here, like the release strategy, as far as if you're releasing singles, EPs, LP, like however you want to release it, it should be more based on what your live schedule looks like. And if you're out like in different places on a consistent basis, then maybe a full album makes sense, because then you have like that hard copy thing to sell at shows or whatever. But if you're more of once a month and you're playing just locally in town, or you don't travel too far outside your area, then yeah, just kind of keep doing singles, because releasing a full album, you're not really, you're blowing your wad in one felt swoop right there. So
yeah,
that's kind of my whole thought process on it. And a lot of musicians seem to agree, but it just kind of depends on what their live schedule looks like. And obviously with the pandemic, there hasn't been many live shows going on. Well, I mean, at least initially, but now it seems like they're kind of picking up a little bit. So, what is your show schedule looking like? I know you are you doing in-person live shows right now? Are you doing live streams? What's your live show situation kind of looking like?
Yeah, it's been such a weird world for a couple of years now. My live schedule is mostly so I live stream every Wednesday, which is really fun. That's probably like the highlight of my week. I love to do that. My mom's there, my sister when she can come. So that's really fun. Every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific time on all the platforms I'm on. Basically, Instagram seems to be the most popular. But I'm playing live a bit. I've played mostly in the last year. I've played mostly hired gigs. So like private events, weddings, corporate stuff that hired me out to play for a party of some sort. And that's felt pretty safe, because as the performer, you're often a little bit isolated from the rest of the crowd. But there's, the live shows, we've been through a lot, obviously, in these 2 years. So there's been waves and bumps. So there were definitely some times where I started to get out there and play a little bit in like bars or venues in LA. But it's kind of quieted down already, and I don't know where it's going from here. I want to start playing. I want to have a show in February or March just for my own artistry, just with all these songs I've been writing. But I honestly don't know if it's a good idea. So we'll see.
Fair enough. That makes sense. Yeah, like with the current state of things, you just never know how people are going to feel, especially being in person.
Totally.
So
well, that's been really hard, but with the silver linings, like the live stream capabilities have kind of like gotten so much better as like COVID has kind of killed off our live events. So at least there's that, and I feel like there's a lot of work and fun stuff I could play with on live streaming. Like I've never really played the keyboard on my live stream. I could definitely and you can, since you're playing through the computer, you have access if you do a little jumping through hoops. I think you have access to fun sounds. You
Yeah.
can play your electric pianos and things. So
Yeah. So you primarily live stream on Instagram. Have you thought about jumping over to Twitch? That seems to be the very popular thing right now.
So I use Restream.io, and there's a couple of them that do that. And now I'm sure, I guess, yeah, you probably know everything about that as
Yeah.
being a streamer. But yeah, so I've been using Restream, and and OBS, and I do stream to Twitch as well. But like, I don't really know how to increase my viewership on any of the platforms, to be honest. So it's just kind of going there, and I have a couple of random viewers that trickle in, and I always think, I'm like, oh, it must be this friend, and then I'll ask them, and they're like, no, I didn't even know you were doing that. So
Yeah.
it seems like it might be a random person, but I would love to reach more people with all of these.
And I think that's just as far as like just the basic promotions of, hey, going on Instagram or whatever, hey, I'm going to be live on Twitch tonight at 5, like whatever it is. And that seems to work. And now that Instagram has that nifty little feature that you can attach a link to a story without having to do the swipe up thing, so they like just got a little like you can attach a link to it, which is really cool and should help a little bit. Maybe give that a try as well. So are you simultaneously streaming to Twitch and Instagram, or is it just kind of one or the other depending on?
Well, that's what I'm doing right now, is I simultaneously stream to like a bunch of places like YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So that's what Restream will allow you to do, but I'm not sure that that's like the best strategy. I mean, yeah, it limits how much I can interact with each platform. So usually I'm like watching properly on Instagram, so I see everyone coming in through there. But other than that, it's just kind of like a viewer tally count.
Yeah.
So
Gotcha. I mean, it does make sense to just be as many places as you can, because each different social media platform has their own active viewer base. Like the people that are on Instagram may not be on Facebook and may not be on Twitter, so it definitely has its own unique viewership, which is interesting, but it also opens the can of worms that you just brought up about not being able to interact with each individual social media stream unless you got people that are just on their phones interacting for you.
Yeah.
Or you're talented enough to do that all yourself and have 4 screens open and be able to kind of watch all the comments.
I need more devices.
That just sounds like a nightmare, to be honest with you. Because I've thought about switching from Zoom over to Restream and doing something like that, just because a lot of people ask me for the podcast if it's available on Instagram or if it would be available on Instagram. It's like, no, we don't really stream to Instagram. Maybe we should start streaming to Instagram. I don't know. That's just kind of a thing that I've been toying around with in my head for at least 2022. So
yeah.
But anyways, so let's talk about your quest to start producing, or your quest to produce your own music, and that ever growing learning curve that's going on there. When did you start taking an interest into producing your own music, or just producing music in general?
Well, that's such a nice question. Like, I don't know if I was really, I think I always thought it was so cool. Like, when I was 16 and people would describe or show like a piece of gear and here's all these ins and outs, and, just looking at those electronic gear was super cool, and thinking about it. So I always thought it was really cool, but I never really thought of myself as really wanting to, like, really having a passion for sound engineering or wanting to really be the guy in the studio. I always wanted to be kind of more of a musician or an artist. But I thought at the time, I was like, well, I have no idea how I'm going to make anything like this happen. I should just do everything I can possibly think of. And I had a lot of resistance from my parents. So it was kind of like trying to like skirt around things. And so I got a job at a recording studio when I got to UC Berkeley. And it was, I was hoping we were going to be in there recording awesome bands, and I was going to learn how to use like a big mixing board, just like I saw in the movies. But in reality, we were just taking like these old tapes of, there was actually a lot of funding given in the like 1960s or so to UC Berkeley to document both ancient languages, especially Native American languages that were in danger of dying out and probably have died out by this time, as well as songbirds and bird calls. So there were just tons of this reel-to-reel tape just sitting in storage from graduate students from the 1960s that had recorded all of this material and then just dumped it in storage because they didn't have anything to do with it. And now computers had come around, 50, 40 years later. I was at Berkeley, and so they were paying us as student helpers to just digitize it and put it on the computer. So that was my introduction to electronic equipment and recording and stuff. And so I kind of got really interested in that stuff, thought it was really cool the way that, magnetic filings are aligning and that's somehow storing audio content. It's like, wow, I still don't understand that too well. So that kind of got me interested in some of the basics. And then I also started to learn how expensive and prohibitive it is to like do that stuff. So I was then using the studio a little bit for my work, but also learning how to get some cheap equipment. And then it kind of just snowballed from there. And, here we are in 2022. And I'll say that, like, my God, it's amazing that we can do what we can do now at home. Like, I'm just in my studio apartment here in Westwood in LA, and I don't really need anything except to be better. I need to like learn some skill for sure. But like I've spent a fair amount of money and a lot of time learning a little, and I'm not that good. I've learned a little bit about how to produce, and you can do an amazing job. You can create amazing masters in your bedroom now. And you just really could not do that in 2000. It was just too expensive. Like you couldn't get these equipment and have all these plugins. So it's almost like, I definitely got more interested in the mixing. And I've always loved pop music and how well put together. There's a lot of work, right, that goes into like, crafting an art piece that's that well manicured. Mm-hmm. So I've always loved that. And as I started to learn what went into that, I started to grow an interest, and that was kind of organic. But I kind of also feel like I just rode the wave of the zeitgeist, which is just that like all this equipment and ability is like it's approachable now, and you really just, you have to like go and work in a studio or something in the 2000s. So
yeah, you touched on something really interesting there about how the equipment now, like nowadays, the equipment's there and you can eat. Like right now, I'm doing this entire thing through a Zoom H6, which is an interface. And like if you think about what it would take to host an interview like this back in 2000, it's like, yep, you'd have to have a whole soundboard. You'd have to run it through your computer. And now the only reason it's plugged into my computer is because I needed to connect to Zoom. But other than that, I could literally walk around with this thing and interview 5 people at a time. And it's not a thing. But nowadays, it's more about honing your skills and knowing, okay, I've got all these instruments. What do I do with them? Or how do I use them? Or how do I incorporate them? So it's more about having to know more about the skill instead of trying to figure out how to do it as well. Whereas back then, you had to know how. You had to have the skill, but you had to have the know-how of what or how to record it.
Yeah.
So you touched on that, and I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's really changed a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And so what is your current home setup for like recording your music right now? What are you using gear-wise or what have you?
Well, here you're looking at my studio. It doesn't have a very wide angle lens, but I record into my computer. I have a Mac Mini. It's the Intel style, and it's been working great for me. It's pretty tricked out. It was a little expensive, but
Mac Minis are actually really underrated computers. I try and tell people that they're like, well, I can't afford a Mac. You can afford a Mac Mini. Mac Mini, you can get a decent Mac Mini for not insanely expensive.
Totally. I totally agree. And if I were to do it again, I would buy a different model probably. But this is awesome. This is an awesome computer. I hope it lasts me 10 more years, honestly. Maybe 5. So I go into that. I go into Logic. I just use Logic because it's what I learned back when I was talking about going to that studio for the first time. It was just what we had in the studio. So that was what I learned. I'd love to move to Pro Tools one day, but I'm not going to do that for a little while because I got to learn it and all that. all the sound banks. That's the main thing. Is I don't know. I have to find a lot of sounds again. So I record into Logic. I've got my little MIDI keyboard, and I record most acoustic instruments. I record mostly through a mic now. I used to plug them in directly into the interface sometimes, like a DI, but I find that it's a lot nicer to record them with a microphone. So I've got this really nice Rode NTK. I don't actually know which NT it is. NTA maybe. It's one of the nicer. I like it. It's a nice middling condenser mic, and I think I'm sure everyone hears this 1,000 times who's like into audio at all, but like getting like a pretty mid-level condenser mic, you can probably just stop there. Like you can do everything with that if you wanted. I also use this like what I'm talking to now, which is like an older and cheaper condenser mic that I've dropped 1,000 times, and I use it more often than the nice one because it's mounted right here in front of me on the table, and it's just convenient. So that's kind of lame. I've been thinking recently, is that like stupid and like making low quality recordings for no reason? So I use that, and that's pretty much it. I use a ton of, plugins and stuff on the computer, and I know a little bit about what I'm doing, but mostly I don't know what I'm doing. So,
but as you find yourself in a situation where you need to learn how to do something, are you going to YouTube or whatever and like, hey, I need to figure out how to make this bass sound better? Like I'm just making something up here, but are you going to like YouTube and going to the University of YouTube on that one?
I think I want to do that more again, actually. I want to get back to the University of YouTube because I watched a lot of YouTube videos to learn a little bit about what I know now, but like I've been recently pretty dissatisfied with the way some things are sounding in my mixes, and it's just like it's not something where you can really like diagnose it that easily and figure out even what's going on, because it's such an iterative process too and stuff. And it's like by the time you're at the whatever draft you're on and you're like, I don't really like the way this is sounding, like who knows how you're going to get it to a new place. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm struggling with that. I'm actually considering one day going back properly to school.
Because the issue,
so expensive, so.
The issue that you kind of brought up with YouTube is you've got to know what you got to try and fix on it to search for it. Whereas if you have not a clue, if it's sounding hollow or whatever, and you don't know how to describe it or how to search for it, it's just like YouTube ain't going to help you. You still got to have some basic knowledge. But you brought up using Logic and hopefully one day wanting to switch to Pro Tools. If you're looking to properly go back to school and get an education on it, that may be the time to switch, because I think most schools will probably not force you into Pro Tools, but teach you in Pro Tools. And I know that's the issue with myself and my partner in this, Jeff. He uses Pro Tools. I use Adobe Audition because that's what I've got. I'm not paying for Pro Tools. And he gets mad at me because like the way I do things in Audition is like 100 times different than the way he does things in Pro Tools. So when we send stuff back and forth, he's trying to tell me how to fix something. And it's like, I don't have that. I don't know. He's like, fine, I'll learn how to use Audition just so I could tell you how to fix this. And I'm like, because it's a lot easier for him to learn how to use Audition because he's got the proper education. He's been doing audio production for 10 years, so he's got all the experience. Whereas I just do the basic podcast, or maybe I'll mix an acoustic set because you've got 2, maybe 3 mics and you're really not doing anything super complex there. But other than that, it's an interesting battle about what DAW you're using and being able to jump in between. So
people have been saying, Pro Tools has been like industry standard forever, but people say that like all the other DAWs are catching up, and especially Logic, which I think is really true, because with Logic you can cite like actual examples of things they've added, features they've added, and things like that. Some competitive features that Pro Tools doesn't have. But it seems to me like the really pros use Pro Tools, so I think I want to one day just be on the same page as them. But this is going to sound crazy because it is crazy, but I feel like it's louder. Like you can get a louder mix out of Pro Tools than Logic, and that can't be true. That's like that doesn't sound possible that's like
maybe you're getting a fuller mix out of Pro Tools.
Maybe that's it, and that's why it sounds like louder.
Or it sounds more present. Everything sounds more present.
Something like that. Which the logic there doesn't make sense to me, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. That is an interesting thought though, because I've never used Logic. I've never touched Logic, so I don't know what that's all about. But I have seen Pro Tool. I've compared Pro Tool mixes to my mixes through Audition, and it's like, it sounds a lot better because the person mixing knows what they're doing. But B, I don't know, just Audition for like the podcast and like simple stuff, that's fine. But when you're trying to do a 20-track mix with 5 drum mics and guitar, bass, all that stuff, it's just like, yeah, I'm good on that. I'll leave that to the professionals. So, no, it's cool that you're taking more of an interest in the production aspect. I think a lot of musicians would really benefit from taking an interest, maybe not necessarily learning all the ins and outs, but when they're listening to a mix, knowing how to express what they're hearing or what they don't like to a producer or an editor would be really beneficial. Like if they don't like the fact that their voice is buried too deep into the mix or, something like that, then they know how to explain it. Or at least try and get to the producer's level or the editor's level and be like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Am I hearing things or, I don't like it. So I think a lot of musicians would benefit from a basic production course, I guess would be the best way to.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like part of songwriting now almost, I mean, in a sense, it kind of always is because like when you're writing, you're thinking, okay, I'm going to put this chorus, and you kind of think with the music and the words together, right? And if you just take it one more step with the production, you're like, okay, I'm going to want like kind of a loud cymbal rise, and then it's going to drop out to this part of it's all at the end of the day, a really nice piece of art is like one thing, right? And all of it works together. So it's an impossible task.
Yeah, for sure. But let's talk about life outside of music a little bit. I know you brought up that you're a scientist. You're a neuroscientist, right? Or
okay.
Yeah. So, which has always been really interesting to me. We might have talked about this during the Pan Can fundraiser for a brief minute, but I have cerebral palsy, which is a neurological situation, and I've always been really interested by the idea of neurogenesis. Not to get too deep into the weeds for people that want to sit here and listen to us talk about music, but I've just I found out about it 6, 7, 8 years ago or so, and I've been really intrigued by that theory. Is it a theory or is it a proven fact that neurogenesis?
It's a fact. So neurogenesis just means like making new neurons. And neurons, you don't usually make new neurons. I mean, as an adult, mostly we call them post-mitotic. So mitosis is when the cells divide and make, 2 copies of the same thing from one. Neurons are post-mitotic for the most part. So that means that like during development, during like embryonic development, or to some extent, probably during a child's life, I'm pretty fuzzy on these. There's more neurogenesis in children, that the brain is continuing to develop and you're generating more cells, you're generating more neurons that are continuing to develop into the organ. But by the time you reach a certain age, which I don't know what that is, but it's a transition to adulthood, then neurogenesis really stops. Well, we used to say it stops, but Now, we found that there are a couple of regions of the brain where neurogenesis continues to occur, or at least you're capable of undergoing neurogenesis there. And I would say that that's about where the really strong knowledge drops off, and that's where the cutting edge of research is now. But
Yeah.
they know that adult neurogenesis involved in learning and memory in adults. I think it's basically like a really simplistic, oversimplified way to look at it is that neurogenesis is good.
Yeah.
And that, like many things with aging, a lot of those good processes start to work a little less well. So we've always thought with aging, you stop having neurogenesis, but in fact, things like regular exercise, eating well, etc., can promote your brain's propensity to do neurogenesis, which can be involved in a lot of positive things such as better learning and memory, and a lot of other things too that I can't remember, unfortunately.
Yeah, I got you.
But yeah.
I now remember where I started originally learning about neurogenesis and adult neurogenesis, or where I first started getting an interest. It was when I saw the most recent remake of Planet of the Apes. There was a whole, like, that was how in the first movie, that was how the apes got smarter, or that's
is that right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. So they like put new brain cells in them or something?
They give him some kind of medicine or something to generate neurogenesis, and now they're like superhumans essentially. So, and when I saw that, it was just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then I started Googling neurogenesis, and it's like, oh, this is a real thing, not a fake Hollywood storyline that they're just kind of making things up. But
mostly fake.
Yeah.
A little bit of truth.
But no, so that's always really interesting. I do love. I have been taking an interest in neurogenesis and just kind of studying it a little bit. I'm not a scientist, so a lot of the big words just go right over the head there. But
yeah, we all
I look them up and I try and make sense out of it. So
one thing I'll say is that it's been really great to work in science, but it's hard, and making progress is really hard. And the type of research I do is very, very basic research. And so it can be hard to feel connected to, like, why am I doing it? There's a lot of sacrifice involved in it of many sorts. It's very difficult work for lots of reasons. And if you're not if you're not grounded in your reason for doing it, and you're not really connected to your purpose, it can be really hard. So I have thought a lot about shifting towards something more medically focused, biomedically focused, where you can think, okay, today's experiments, they have to do with curing cancer. And I really can't think that way with my research right now. So I'm considering making a shift in some way, maybe working at least on neurodegenerative diseases.
Would you have to go back to school for that, or?
That's a good question. I probably wouldn't go back to school at this point. That would be too much school, but I would have to learn, and I would have to shift somehow. So it would be hard for me to get a job in cancer research, right? Because I know like brain research pretty well, but all the molecules are different in cancer research, so I don't know all the literature. So I'd have to learn that, and then it might be a little hard to get hired as a researcher in cancer since I don't have the background, but it's totally doable. It's more a question of, like, it's a big undertaking, So like if I decided to do that, I'd have to really commit to that path, and then I'd have to work my butt off. So probably won't do it for those reasons.
Yeah, and you'd have to maybe put your music to the side for a little bit while you dedicate yourself. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. What's kind of the outlook for 2022? Do you have any other, outside the live streams that you do? Do you have any shows on the books? What's the outlook for 2022?
I have a lot of hope. I've really been wanting to share my music. I've been making all these songs. So definitely my hope for 2022 is to get some regular releasing going on, and hopefully get some more ears on my music, and hopefully people just liking them. Get back to a really much more organic way of, like, trying to live my life in general. And that really has a lot to do with music, where I'm just making the music, letting it go, and not so focused on where it's going and this and that. But yeah, Yeah, just a lot of hope for me and for everyone else, especially artists, but really just the whole world. A lot of hope for us for 2022, for turning a lot of things around.
Yep, absolutely. I really hope so. I hope the turnaround happens in 2022. So, but I do want to thank you for jumping on here and chatting with me for a little bit. If anybody wants to check out your music that you released in 2021 or your live streams or anything else that you got going on, where's the best place to do that?
You can find it anywhere, on any of your music distribution platforms that you prefer, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all that. You just type Shivan Luca. That's Shivan. Second name is Luca, Luca, and I'm sure it'll pop up there. You can find my Instagram, Twitter, that's all at Shivan Luca. Please follow me. I'll be posting more and stuff. And before we get cut off, Tom, thank you so much for this morning and for giving me this chance to talk about myself for so long. That was very self-aggrandizing and fun.
Absolutely. It's kind of funny because so the reason that I have this one slot open on Sunday mornings so early is because I kept getting emails about I don't have any slots available for people over in the UK.
Oh,
And so it's like, okay, well, I could put like, because we have a pretty decent following in the UK, but we don't get a lot of musicians from there that jump on, maybe one a month or so. But 9 times out of 10, people from not the UK take this 9 a.m. slot. And for whatever reason, the last 4 or 5 times, they've all been out in LA. And I'm like, are you guys insane? What are you guys doing? But it's just very funny to me. And you know, we try to accommodate everyone that we can.
thank you.
And luckily, by moving our show dates or our stream times to 9 p.m., it accommodates a lot more people. It just kind of cuts out the UK, which is why we have this slot. But anyways,
Well, now I know to save this one for UK people.
Oh, it's not a thing. It's just kind of funny because it seems to always LA people sign up for this 9 a.m. slot. And it's like, all right, maybe LA people or California people are morning people. I don't know.
Something like that.
So there's some logic to it. There's got to be a logic to it. But I do really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with us. And once you do kind of figure out the release strategy, if you're going to do an EP, LP, just singles, kind of whatever that thought process ends up being, would love to get you back on and chat a little bit more about your new stuff that you're working on.
That would be awesome.
So
back at you soon. Thank
awesome.
you.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you all later.
Bye. Thank you.
Cool. We are good.